Esther chapter 4. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes. He went through the city and cried out with a great and bitter cry. But he went only as far as the king's gate, for no one was permitted to enter the king's gate dressed in sackcloth. And in every province, wherever the king's edict and decree reached, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and lamenting, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther's maidens and eunuchs came and told her, the queen was deeply distressed. She sent garments to clothe Mordecai, so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what and why this was. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to deposit in the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a written copy of the edict issued in Susa for their destruction, to show Esther and inform her and charge her to go to the king to implore his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. And Hathach went and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Then Esther instructed Hathach to give Mordecai this message: all the servants of the king and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman approaches the king inside the inner court without being summoned, there is but one law: to be put to death, unless the king extends the golden scepter to him that he may live. And as for me, I have not been summoned to enter the king's presence these 30 days. And they told Mordecai the words of Esther. Then Mordecai told him to take this message to Esther: do not think to yourself that in the house of the king you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Then Esther sent this answer back to Mordecai: go, assemble all the Jews to be found in Susa, and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days, day, night, or day. I and my maidens will also fast in the same way. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went out and did just as Esther had instructed him. Please be seated. Let me recap the story of Esther to this point. Chapter 1, around 483 BC, we have Ahasuerus of Persia, the king of Persia, who gives this lavish banquet in Susa, the capital. A 180-day drinking party. He displays his wealth, and at some point he wants to display his queen to show her beauty before his officials. She refuses. The king is enraged. He dethrones her. He banishes her from his sight. A little irony there, right? Doesn't want to see her anymore. Chapter 2, the king institutes an empire-wide search for a new queen. Mordecai, a Jew living in Susa, has brought up his cousin Esther after her parents died. She's an orphan. And she is chosen as the new queen. Chapter 3, also in chapter 2, Mordecai reveals a plot against the king's life. And this will have bearing in the rest of the story. Chapter 3, the king decrees that everyone must bow before Haman, the prime minister. Mordecai refuses, and now Haman is enraged. He learns that Mordecai is a Jew, and so he persuades the king to kill all the Jews, young and old, women and children. To lock in the deal, he pledges 10,000 talents of silver. It's a huge amount of money. The decree goes out, and we come to chapter 4. Mordecai hears about this, and he insists that Esther speak up. If you remain silent at this time, if you keep quiet now, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows whether you've not come to the kingdom, to royalty, to royal position for such a time as this. Although God is not mentioned by name in the book of Esther, I think clearly right here, it's His presence, His purpose, His plan is implied. He's involved, even though His people are far away from home in a dark time. God's purpose, His larger purpose, ultimately will prevail. Verse 14 also assumes the vital role of human actions, our part, specifically human speech. From the beginning, we were created in the image of God, and that entails responsibility and stewardship. And I recently read in the March issue of First Things, the concept of a covenant or an alliance between God and man is constructed around the metaphor of a king in need of the active assistance of his ministers, generals, and allies. The character of God's project with His people requires their participation from its inception. That was a quote. And then we have the language of Mordecai. He says, "Who knows?" And that suggests to me there's some hope. There's a glimmer of hope here. Who knows? Possibility, if not certainty. And how is that to happen? Well, God has given us a wonderful set of tools called words. Ecclesiastes 3, there is a time to be silent and a time to speak. Esther had been put in a unique place, a unique time, and not to speak would have been a betrayal. She didn't ask for this job. She didn't choose the place. She didn't choose the time. It was what was given her. I enjoy the Lord of the Rings movies. And in the Two Towers, Frodo and Sam are traveling toward Mount Doom to destroy the Ring of Power. And Sam says, Mordor, the one place in Middle Earth we don't want to see any closer, and the one place we're trying to get to. Let's face it, Mr. Frodo, we're lost. I don't think Gandalf meant for us to come this way. And Frodo says, he didn't mean for a lot of things to happen, Sam, but they did. So Mordecai says, for such a time as this, there is a time to confront. There is a time to challenge the foolish and cruel. There is a time to speak truth to power. John the Baptist was a voice crying in the wilderness, and he confronted Herod. There is a time, in the words of Paul, for destroying arguments and every proud obstacle to the knowledge of God. There is a time to speak for the vulnerable, for those in danger, for our brothers and sisters suffering persecution in other places, for victims of the sexual revolution, especially the unborn, to share the good news of the kingdom with those weighed down in sin, to speak the truth in love. And my plea, my point is that we not discount the power of our words. God has put us here at this place, at this time, for a reason. We are not here by accident. If we speak the truth of God, there is a power behind it that transcends time. Whatever the situation looks like, it is not hopeless. We are not permitted to capitulate to cynicism or despair. Richard John Newhouse was one of my great heroes. He died in January of 2009. He was a relentless voice for protecting the unborn, for preserving the sanctity of marriage, and defending democracy against what he called the judicial usurpation of politics. In probably his last speech at the National Right to Light Convention, Newhouse said, quote, "We do not need to know how the battle for the dignity of the human person will be resolved. God knows, and that is enough. As Mother Teresa of Calcutta and saints beyond numbering have taught us, our task is not to be successful, but to be faithful. Yet in that faithfulness is the lively hope of success. We are stronger because we are unburdened by delusions. We know that in a sinful world, far short of the promised kingdom of God, there will always be great evils. The principalities and powers will continue to rage, but they will not prevail. In the midst of the encroaching darkness of the culture of death, we have heard the voice of Him who said, 'In the world you will have trouble, but fear not, I have overcome the world.' Because He has overcome, we shall overcome. We do not know when, we do not know how. God knows, and that is enough. We know the justice of our cause. We trust in the faithfulness of His promise, and therefore we shall not weary, we shall not rest. Who knows whether we have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this?"